Good morning. This is Emil Frankel, the interim president of the Eno Center for Transportation. Welcome to this, what I think will be a very, very interesting policy briefing. The Eno Center for Transportation is fortunate, as are all of you, members and supporters of Eno, to have a very unique asset available to us, and that's Jeff Davis, who is the editor, journalist, publisher of Eno Transportation Weekly, and I think, as everybody in the transportation world knows, the best informed person in Washington on what is happening, particularly on transportation and related fiscal and budget issues. And he's going to share his impressions and summary of what's been occurring in Congress over the last couple of weeks, particularly. It's been obviously a very active time with the election of a new speaker, agreements, apparently so, on broad budget fiscal issues and increasing the debt ceiling. And of course, what we're going to talk about primarily is developments, temporary, short term or not, and some hopefully longer term developments relating to the surface transportation legislation. Let me mention, after Jeff completes his remarks, that you should, people who are participating in this briefing should submit questions. You're free to submit questions. You have two ways to do that, is either by using the chat function on GoToWebinar, or you can email us here at Eno, and the email address is publicaffairs@enotrans.org. Again, publicaffairs@enotrans.org. The question and answer part of the policy briefing will be moderated by my colleague here at the Eno Center for Transportation, Marla Westerveld. And with that, I'll turn things over to Jeff Davis.
Thank you very much, Emil. We are going to have an interesting, action-packed week on Capitol Hill next week. I'll just give a little rundown on what's happening with the surface transportation bill right now. The Transportation Committee actually filed its explanatory report on the bill yesterday. It went online on the GPO server about 8 o'clock this morning, so people can read that. However, the Rules Committee has already had to make a few alterations to the bill as approved by T&I to fix some budget scorekeeping problems that I actually pointed out, I think, that were going to cause it to be $9 billion over its ceiling. So the Rules Committee has fixed those. Members of the House have until 2 p.m. today to submit amendments to the surface transportation bill they want to offer. Some members get late. If members offering amendments on behalf of committees like Energy and Commerce or Ways and Means, they can be late. Everyone else has to kind of stick to the 2 p.m. deadline. The Rules Committee is doing a very unusual procedure this time because they're not going to bring up the House-passed bill itself, H.R. 3763. They're going to bring the Senate-passed DRIVE Act, H.R. 22 amendment, straight to the floor. And the reason they're doing that is because when you are dealing with a Senate amendment to a House bill, you got to deal with the amendment, not the underlying bill itself. And to amend that, you say, okay, I'm going to agree to we the House are going to agree to the Senate amendment with an amendment, that consists of whatever the House wants to add or subtract. But they're agreeing. So if the House passes the DRIVE Act with an amendment that doesn't affect the DRIVE Act's pay-fors or does not affect the Export-Import Bank extension, that's the same as the House agreeing to it and sending it down to the president. It's outside the reach of the conference committee. So the key question is, what amendments will be offered to the pay-fors in the DRIVE Act? And will those amendments pass? Now, the DRIVE Act originally had $46 billion in pay-fors. Some of those were poached by the short-term extension in early August that got us through this week. That took about $8.5 billion away. So there are still about $37.5 billion in pay-fors left in the DRIVE Act. Those are enough to support the DRIVE Act's spending through October 2018. The House bill spends less than the DRIVE Act. So the House bill, if you change the spending levels in DRIVE to the House spending levels, it only needs $32.3 billion in pay for. So the Senate passed DRIVE Act can afford to lose $5.2 billion pay for somehow. The only amendment related to pay fors that has been filed as of a minute ago was by Ways and Means Committee Democrats. They don't like the provision in DRIVE that will allow private contractors to collect tax debts on behalf of the IRS. The image they strike is you don't want Dog the Bounty Hunter coming to collect your tax debts. They would rather have more money for IRS employees to do tax collection. And not coincidentally, IRS employees join NTEU and pay dues that go to Democratic politicians. But still, so they propose to strike that. I'm not sure if that amendment's going to pass or be allowed, but that would take $2.5 billion to pay for away. So you could accept that amendment, and it wouldn't affect the spending levels in the House bill. The real question is, will the so-called fiscal conservatives in the House who don't like spending at all wise up and try to amend those pay fors? Because you can be very certain that if the House goes into conference with the Senate's aggregate level of pay fors, then the conferees will find a way to spend that money and increase the spending levels in the bill in conference to get up to the Senate's level. So if the House allows the bill to pass that has more pay fors than it needs, the conferees will most certainly find a way to spend that. There's also the biggest pay for in the DRIVE Act is the Federal Reserve dividend cut. That's in the Financial Services Committee's jurisdiction. And the community bankers are up in arms about that. That's $17.1 billion. There's a lot of discussion that the community bankers are going to try to have someone file an amendment on the floor to strike that or amend that heavily in some way so it doesn't cut as much. And there's also the issue of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. The DRIVE Act would sell 101 million barrels of oil because, of course, buy high, sell low is the smart play. That's in the Energy and Commerce Committee's jurisdiction. Chairman Upton wanted to use 80 million barrels of sales to pay for a prescription drug bill that he wants to do. And the budget deal that the Senate passed at 2:30 this morning would sell 58 million barrels of oil from the SPR as one of its pay fors. And apparently, Republicans are going to just accept it all, say, we'll just sell it all, or not all. But if you add those three together, that's 239 million barrels of oil. That's 1/3 of the SPR. SPR is at 695 million barrels in it right now. So I meant to include this in this week's ETW, but lost track of time. I was going to put a little link to the YouTube clip of Will Ferrell as George W. Bush and the word strategery, because it's becoming the strategic petroleum reserve, not the strategic petroleum reserve, if we're going to sell off oil to pay for whatever else the current pressing issue of the day is. Beyond that, it's important to point out that the DRIVE Act or the STR Act, they're both aspiring, they're 3-year bills, assuming you get paid for it, aspiring to be 6-year bills. And the fundamental idea of both these bills is that a future Congress and a future president will put another $45 to $50 billion in the Highway Trust Fund from somewhere in 2018 in order to activate the spending in the last 3 years of the bill. So again, the Rules Committee the deadline will be today at 2 p.m. The Rules Committee will meet on Monday at 5 p.m. for Part 1. They're going to set general debate terms and make a few amendments in order. And then they will meet again on Tuesday to consider the rest of the amendments, however many get submitted. It's probably going to be 100 and some. So the bill will come to the House floor on Tuesday for a vote for the initial general debate. We're not quite sure how many amendments will be made in order, but if you watched Speaker Ryan's initial remarks from the chair yesterday, he talked a lot about returning to regular order and empowering committee chairmen and making sure that all members get a chance to be a part of the process. That would seem to indicate that the Rules Committee, which works for the Speaker, will err on the side of allowing more amendments to be debated rather than fewer. The House leadership is aiming for the House to vote on final passage of the bill Thursday about lunchtime. So assuming the bill passes, DRIVE Act as amended by whatever passes on Thursday at lunchtime, what next? The next step is obviously at some point to appoint a conference committee with the Senate. And there are some mechanical issues at work there because the House may or may not do that on Thursday. And the problem is you've got a long recess week for a holiday the next week. And then you come back and you've got a 4-day work week up till Thanksgiving. And so we're not quite sure when the House will vote to, the House goes first to request a conference with the Senate. And then the Senate can't do its part until the clerk of the House amends the paperwork with all the amendments and sends it back over there, which usually takes a day or so. And then those amendments to the motion to go to conference in the Senate can be debated. And if Ted Cruz, if the Ex-Im Bank is still in there and Senator Cruz is still bent out of shape over it, it would take 2 days just to agree to go to conference. Then you got to appoint a conferees, do a bunch of negotiations, even though some of that can be done at the staff level in advance, make all the big decisions, get the paperwork together, give House conferees time to read it, because that's in the rules now, unitary place to sign it, pass it through the House, pass it through the Senate, over filibuster with more cloture. So all that is going to be hard to do in the 4 days leading up to November 20th. And so another extension of some duration is probably going to be necessary. If they make good progress at starting a conference, it's easy to justify. And there are now no more good reasons for the Senate to oppose extending highway trust fund issues into December. The reason that Chairman Inhofe and Ranking Member Boxer were so deathly opposed to extending past Thanksgiving was twofold. They were afraid that their offsets would get taken by the budget deal, and they were afraid of, and they wanted to have the railroads pushing the bill to get the positive train control relief. Both those ships have now sailed. The budget deal is done, and PTC is signed into law as of last night. So those two reasons for Inhofe and Boxer wanting to avoid extending into early December no longer apply. So, you can see if they can at least appoint conferees before Thanksgiving, you can see making pretty good progress and getting a bill that everybody has time to read before voting on it done by early mid-December. Because if you try to get a conference report passed before November 20th, it's going to be one of those big 1,000-page stacks of paper that gets walked through and nobody has time to read. And again, that flies in the face of the orderly process that Speaker Ryan was talking about his aspirations for Congress just yesterday. So, like I said, the Rules Committee will have the text of all the amendments posted by tonight, and then they'll start going through them on Monday and Tuesday, and we've got a full week of debate in the House, and looking forward to moving this process down the road, and that's where we stand right now.
Thank you, Jeff, for that wonderful explanation. Remember, if you have any questions, please email them in to publicaffairs@enotrans.org or use the chat function on the webinar. So for the first question, does the fact that Paul Ryan is now Speaker of the House increase the likelihood of using an international tax overhaul for more pay-fors for the long-term transportation bills? It seems that the Senate Majority Leader McConnell is opposed to this idea, but the next Senate Democratic leader and potential future Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is a favorite of this concept. Will Speaker Ryan wait until the 115th Congress to work on something like this?
I believe that having Speaker Ryan in charge, well, it can't hurt the prospects of it, depending on who gets elected to be chairman of Ways and Means. We're not quite sure. Sam Johnson will be interim chairman while they wait a couple of weeks to elect a new chairman. But obviously nothing like that's going to happen this year. So the question, I guess, is could that maybe happen in time for 2018, by the deadline to put the next $45 or $50 billion into the Highway Trust Fund from elsewhere? And yes, it could. But you got to remember that it was Speaker Boehner supported Ryan in the tax reform efforts this year. And the problem was in the Senate, where Senators McConnell and Hatch had decided that they could not get tax reform negotiated with this particular president. So the big issue from the congressional Republican standpoint is who wins the presidential election, not so much who's speaker, because that was the current occupant of the White House was the reason why McConnell and Hatch said hell no to tax reform this year. And we'll have to see what the next president thinks as far as international tax reform and other issues of potential tax clarification and simplicity.
So the next question is a freight question. So this person has been hearing several efforts to offer amendments in the Rules Committee to make additions to the list of high priority corridors on the National Highway System. What do you know about the significance of these efforts as they relate to the eligibility for new discretionary freight program in the House bill?
None of those amendments have been filed as of last night, but it wouldn't surprise me if they get in there. As far as the there's going to be several similar groupings of amendments because we don't do earmarking anymore, and earmarking being defined as putting specific dollar amounts of money for specific geographic areas. But there are other ways, and one of those is the old high priority corridor list in ICE-T of if you restrict eligibility for potential funding to a certain group of geographic areas and let somebody else, DOT, make the decision, it's not earmarking anymore. So there were several amendments filed with T&I in the markup to add more corridors to the ICE-T list. And there were also more regionally specific truck size and weight waivers. So the question is, how will Rules Committee group all these together? Because the way that, if you read the old poli-sci textbooks from the 1800s, log rolling, it was originally about rivers and harbors, but congressional members of Congress would always say, well, okay, I'll vote for your specific project for your area if you vote for mine, and then they all get passed. So the question is, will rules allow a bunch of different regional specific amendments, whether it's corridors, whether it's regional truck size and weight issues, to go ahead individually or group them all together? But yes, and the big question as far as the freight program goes is because all the money above the baseline, the extra spending on highways that's in Drive that's not in the House bill goes to that big formula freight program. So the question of the offsets and what will the total aggregate pay for levels be as the bill passes the House directly affects the fate of that formula freight program, because the only way to do that formula freight program at the House's overall spending level is to cut your traditional programs of NHS and STP.
Okay, next question. Who is generally appointed as a conferee? Is it likely additional conferees will be appointed for the Export Import Bank or other issues?
The House and Senate work fundamentally differently on this. In the Senate, all that really matters is the total number of Republican majority conferees and the total number of Democratic conferees. And then within there, they try to get some different committee representation. But that's all that matters. And all Senate conferees, their signature is valid for the entire bill, and from both chambers and all that put together. So all that matters is the total number, and the committee of jurisdiction doesn't matter. In the House, they pick one committee that's in charge of most of the bill, and they get their say, and then you put conferees from other committees that only have jurisdiction over their little chunks. So the House, if Financial Services Committee members will be appointed for the XM provision, Division I of the Senate amendment and whatever's in the House bill. But remember, if the House doesn't amend the XM stuff, there will be no conference on that because it will already have been agreed to and effectively sent to the president. So, so the T&I will have majority say. They appoint conferees from the Science Committee for the research stuff, the Energy and Commerce Committee for NHTSA, Ways and Means for the trust fund and tax stuff. And I suppose if SPR is in there, Energy and Commerce gets conferees for that. But generally, you have to look at the numbers and what sections they're over. Usually, the T&I guys are able to outvote all the other conferees except for Ways and Means on stuff. So in order to change to keep things moving.
Great. Next question: is there any prospect for earmarks with Speaker Ryan?
Speaker Boehner was definitely the moving force behind a lot of the consistency of this earmark ban. Boehner famously having never requested an earmark and never received an earmark. However, if you look back in time at some of the earmarks that some other Republicans from Ohio got, they may have actually been in Boehner's district as a favor to him. Look through that. But I don't see a groundswell of rank and file members in the Republican conference, anywhere close to a majority of them, wanting to bring earmarks back at this point. It is one of those things that you would have to have at least, not just a simple majority, but a super majority, maybe close to 2/3 of House Republicans wanting to go on record and say, okay, bring back earmarks before they actually did it. And I'm not sure that's there yet. snafu in there. Hope people can still hear me. All right. All right. Next question, Marls.
All right. Next question. Do you have any idea on what amendments might be offered?
Many of the amendments that were offered in the T&I markup but not accepted will get offered again at some point. Now, Chairman Schuster and Ranking Member DeFazio will take a bunch of the lower profile ones as part of a manager's package, and there'll be one manager's package at the beginning, and then there'll be another one where if rules makes 30, 40 amendments in order, that will allow DeFazio and Schuster to group some of them together and accept them later on down the line. But you're going to see a lot of regional truck size and weight issues. There were, I think, 2 filed already. I just got an email from Rules. They're up to 30 amendments and counting, but most of these get filed right at the very last minute. Everyone was busy yesterday with the speaker stuff, and they had their staff sit down with Led's counsel this morning to draft amendments and get going. There was a Davis-Bacon amendment, you know, the usual things that don't pass, like repealing Davis-Bacon. That's been filed already. You're going to see the big recalculation of donor-donee stuff that will get offered and won't pass, and things like that. But and you're going to see a lot of different amendments filed on the motor carrier safety stuff and the NHTSA stuff. And again, with the airbag recalls and whatnot, and NHTSA vehicle safety has been in the news a lot this year. And so we're still waiting for Chairman Upton to release the text of that part of the bill. And I'm guessing, since we haven't seen it yet, members won't be able to file amendments to it. So that may just get adopted by the House sight unseen.
Okay, next I have a rail question. Do you think that the rail title will be handled since the Senate bill has one and the House bill does not? Will PREA be dropped?
The plan is that there is an informal agreement between the chairman that the House will not offer any rail language on the floor next week, but the Senate will go ahead and act in conference as if the Amtrak bill the House passed earlier this year is the House position. So they will be negotiating passenger rail stuff in conference. That is the current plan. The Senate did not include the STB independent stuff in drive because they knew that was going to be had potential to blow up the bipartisan consensus behind the bill. But the House will negotiate in conference with the House Amtrak bill versus the Senate passenger rail provisions of drive. So they will negotiate those, and it looks like that something on passenger rail will be in the conference report that way.
Here's a paper question. Will banks succeed in cutting all or only a portion of the $17 billion offset?
Don't know. Nothing had been filed this morning, but like I said, that's $17 billion, by far the biggest asset. And if you kill it, the whole bill collapses. Now, I was having a chat with Budget Committee people this morning. This bill and this procedure violates so many different budget rules. We're kind of in sort of never land here. But we're still not quite sure if these amendments that cut some of the pay-fors, what budget rules they might violate, and if they would kill the bill if they were adopted or not. The Budget Committee is still not quite sure. They're going to have some talk with the parliamentarian today and hopefully figure it out by Monday. I should mention the Congressional Budget Office's cost estimate for the House bill was not available yesterday in time for the report to be filed. CBO will release that cost estimate today, I think. It will show the bill being $9 billion over because of those drafting errors, and then CBO will release a separate cost estimate on Monday of the version of the bill that the Rules Committee is making in order that fixes those errors and has it back down to baseline spending levels.
Here's a question that goes back to the conferees. What will be the party ratio on the conference committee?
I would guess in the Senate it'll be Republicans will have 2 more than Democrats. I'm not sure if that'll be 12, 10, 14, 12, or whatever. But in general, that's probably what they're going to shoot for. But again, that generally gets negotiated either by unanimous consent or through a cloture process. So if they try to get unanimous consent to go to conference, they'll have to be a little more generous to the minority than on the other side. So so you'll see the chairman and ranking members of the committees of jurisdiction, and then a few extra members from EPW, and maybe an extra one from Commerce there, and in that final deal.
Okay. Do you have any word on what will happen with the NHTSA title?
NHTSA, I presume you mean NHTSA vehicle safety. Chairman Upton of Energy and Commerce will be offering an amendment to the File and Rules Committee, hopefully today so we can see it, an amendment to add some modified version of their discussion draft on vehicle safety, and he'll offer that on the floor as a substitute for the NHTSA vehicle safety parts of the DRIVE Act. But again, it's one of those things that since we haven't seen it yet, it's probably not going to be members probably aren't going to be allowed to offer amendments to Energy and Commerce's version on the floor because you have to see it before you can be able to draft an amendment to it.
Okay, I have two more questions. So what's the biggest likelihood for failure of this bill on the House floor specifically?
It's looking pretty greased. The Senate position on DRIVE is greatly advantaged by the leadership vacuum that has been going on in the House for the last few weeks. New Speaker Ryan just took all the senior staff of the Ways and Means Committee over to be in the Speaker's office, so now no one knows if Ways and Means will even offer amendments to its part of the paperwork or just let them go through. No one knows anything, and there's been no one in charge so far to, if you were going to strike deals with Chairman Hensarling on Federal Reserve or Chairman Upton on SPR, there had to be someone in leadership with authority to make deals and promise them things down the road, and there's been no one in charge there. So the deadline momentum and the fact that people just don't want to deal with it has been a boon to DRIVE. And it's looking like people are just going to go ahead and say, okay, we'll just move this on through and fight some of the bigger structural battles in 3 years. Right now, there's no big groundswell, particularly because Schuster and DeFazio were able to work out a bipartisan bill. So, despite the fact that Heritage Action, a lot of the conservative groups don't like the bill because it perpetuates a lot of current policies they don't like, and that it's unrelated paperwork and perpetuates the insolvency of the Highway Trust Fund. If you add 170 some solid Democratic votes and build on top of that, you can pass the bill. As long as Chairman Ryan is willing to have the first major act of his speakership be the kind of thing that Republicans criticize Boehner for, i.e. passing a bill with predominantly Democratic votes.
Okay, I have one final question. So with this bill about to go to conference, is there any hope of T&I considering an FAA reauthorization anytime soon?
It won't be in 2015, but their goal is to wrap this up in December and then start circulating a draft of FAA reform in fairly early 2016 and get going on that. They really would like to be able to get it done before the current extension expires March 31st. I'm not sure that's practical. Again, part of the reason that we've had such success on this DRIVE Act is that Senator McConnell is bound and determined to have no controversies in the Senate in 2016. And so that's why we got this budget deal at 3 o'clock this morning, and that's why we've got the DRIVE Act happening, because McConnell wanted to kick both of those down the road past the 2016 elections. So that's helpful in clearing the calendars in 2016, so we'll have time to do less controversial bills. However, if the House FAA reauthorization bill is fundamentally restructuring and there are controversies attached to that, I'm not sure how that plays into Senator McConnell's drama-free 2016 strategy, but we'll have to wait and see.
All right, well, thank you, Jeff, for all your wonderful insights, and thank you to everyone on the call. We will keep you updated via the ETW Twitter as well as ETW Expresses and next week's the issue next week. Thank you.